Trevor, glad to have you on the show, man. This is an interesting interview since we're going to be talking about how real estate investors can build a personal brand through getting on podcasts. So it's going to be a little bit of like a perspective dump from my end as a podcast host when I get requests for getting interviews and stuff like that. So it'll be a cool interview with Trevor. Is the CEO and founder of Podcasting You, a podcast booking agency. I'm excited to hear your story and how you got that up to a six-figure business. But I appreciate, that's what I said before we went live, I appreciate that you have the systems and people in place to send me interviews that I've done and also getting this podcast book. So thanks, man.
Perfect. Thank you, Carlos. And thank you again for, allowing me to come onto the show. And I look forward to our interview today.
Yeah, man, for sure. Where would you like to start as far as why personal brand is so important for real estate investors, especially in this day and age of social media? Or I might suggest starting how you became the founder of this company and what led you towards going down this path and how you got the company started.
Yeah, I think the best thing is just talking about the company because it was something I never expected and something I never foresaw coming. In about 5 years ago, I'd been working a job and I was making $7.03 an hour. And I realized $7.03 an hour just wasn't going to be paying the bills, wasn't really going to be cutting it. And at that time, I was a senior in high school and just really unsure what I was going to do. I remember I came across a book and it outlined the differences between the lower, middle, and upper class. And one of those differences was that the upper class, about 80% of the individuals had gone off and started their own business. And I thought to myself, I've gone door to door lemonade selling. I bought and sold Ed Hardy clothing, basically anything to go out there, make money on my own. Never knew that it was called entrepreneurship. Discovered a site called Alibaba, AliExpress. Basically, you can buy and sell products directly from China. So imported phone cases, quickly found out that if you import brand name phone cases from China, they're going to be knockoffs. But luckily they made great Christmas gifts that year for the friends and family. And then I just wanted to keep pressing on. I imported bracelets and watches, worked with influencers to get them promoted, grew that company, realized it really wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Started a motivational based company called Become the Lion. That grew rather quickly, 600,000 followers in the first year. But what I realized with that company is that people love motivational content. They love to be pumped up. They'll like, share, comment on it all day long. But when we would go out there and create a course on your morning routine, people wouldn't necessarily go out there and purchase it. So after about 2.5, 3 years of that company, became burnt out, decided to take a break on the sidelines and just started freelancing, used some of the skills I had learned, which was editing podcasts, writing blog posts. And I found a prospective freelance client that wanted to get booked on podcasts. She was a turnkey investor based out of California. And I just started working with her. And I discovered that one, I enjoy the process. Two, it paid good money. And three, is a little bit quicker than spending 5 to 6 hours writing one blog post, where in those 5 to 6 hours, I would be able to get her on 3 to 4 different podcasts. So just the time essence just made more sense for me and the value of the money coming in as well. Started with her. I found other clients I wanted to get booked on podcasts, and I just started working with them and found out, again, I was pretty good at it. And then over pretty much the last 3 years, honed in on the niches. And really today, about 80% of our clients are in the real estate investing space. We really honed in on it. And I think it's just an area where just a lot of real estate investors lack when it comes to building a personal brand, becoming noticed in the space. They might be super successful in their local market. They might have the connections in their local area, but they don't have those connections that come across the country. And they're sort of just limiting themselves. So I find that by being a podcast guest and building that personal brand just opens up these extra doors that they wouldn't necessarily have had.
Yeah, man, a lot to unpack there. The guest that you mentioned, the client you mentioned, Ali Boone, is somebody that you caught my eye. So as far as like the approach or the system that you do, where you probably search through podcasts on all the different podcasting platforms that may fit your audience, the way that you pitched Ali to me definitely resonated. I was like, out of the 10% of interviews I do where I don't know the person, usually it's me reaching out to someone via text or Facebook or Instagram, whatever, and saying, hey, we should do an interview, XYZ reasons. Ali definitely caught my eye. We had an amazing interview, still stay in touch to this day. And then I've even connected her with other people that are either in LA or other women real estate investors. So it kind of went down like a ripple effect rabbit hole for her, just in a small case sample of one person, of how powerful that is, having someone helping getting you on podcasts. something that's also interesting from our software business coach is just the amount of podcast content that is consumed other in correlation or comparison to other platforms as far as TV, radio, satellite radio, YouTube, all this different thing where podcast consumption is just the last 3 years skyrocketing. And I'm sure you have way better and more up-to-date statistics than I do, but it actually is interesting and crazy how much people just enjoy podcasts because they're easy. You can be multitasking, all this different stuff. So we could take this a bunch of different ways. I guess I'd kind of like to hear from one thing you said, thinking big and thinking abundantly. It's good to be a public figure just in your local market and even better nationally. I've been lucky and blessed just with my job with InvestorFuse, just from the nature of the business. I get to talk to people all over the country every single day. But what are maybe like some beginning steps for building a brand, or like why would someone want to build a brand as a real estate wholesaler or real estate investor?
I think the first step is one, it's just, it's simple. It's just going out there, building a website. It's going to give you more credibility. And, I would assume if you're going to, even if you want to go out there, be a successful real estate investor, real estate wholesaler, you're going to want to have a website. You could go out there for our company, Podcasting You, for anyone, you look at it, we paid $400 for the website. We hired an individual from India. It took her probably 2 weeks, did a very professional job. So I don't think cost is really going to hinder someone there when it comes to building a website, but you definitely want to make sure you have a professional website, put your bio on there, for people to learn more about yourself. And then once you do, then that's where you can go out there and start reaching out to these podcast hosts to get yourself booked on. And I find the really cool thing what a lot of our clients do is that once they get, once they're booked on a podcast, the interview goes live, they add those podcast interviews to their website so that if you're a potential, let's say you're a potential, you're a wholesaler, you have someone coming to you that wants to wholesale a property, say Kansas City or Indianapolis, Memphis, one of those places, but they don't know that much about you other than what's in your bio. Obviously, you're going to make it sound in the absolute best light. You might fluff it up a little bit and that sort of thing. But when they really get to hear you on a podcast interview, they're going to allow you to connect with them a lot better. Plus, you don't necessarily have to happen a phone call with them where they could be listening to you at the gym, on the car, as you mentioned, where you're spending 30 minutes on a one-on-one format. It's just going to give you that more personal connection than, let's say, if you're at your local RIA and there's 20, 30 people there, it's just going to be hard to network with all of them at once, where on a podcast interview, you're able to network with that host on a one-to-one connection, plus the person's listening to you on that one-to-one connection. So when it comes to building the personal brand, above all else is just having that website completed and then going from there and then going on these podcasts. And we found that we work with an investor out of Kansas City, and by going on podcasts, he's been called, I believe it's the king of Kansas City in the real estate market there, other than I guess he calls Patrick Mahomes. He doesn't like to call himself the exact king of Kansas City, but he's been able to just connect with all these investors all over the country. And for his business, he's a real estate syndicator. So by having these connections, he's been able to grow his business almost tenfold, where instead of just, finding investors in his local market where, yes, he was doing good, but to really sort of get to that next level in his life, he knew that he had to get himself more exposure. More exposure builds more of his brand, so that people are like, I heard Logan on, say, this so-and-so podcast. I really resonated with him. Obviously, if he's on a podcast, he's going to be an expert because they're not going to bring on someone that just has one or two deals under their belt. He's an authority figure that I can look at too. So it's really just, a combination of all those sort of things of building that personal brand and then becoming to, I guess, looked at as an authority on the podcasts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, becoming an authority figure is huge. And that was something I was thinking about leading up to this interview. And even as you were talking, like, who would it be most beneficial for getting on podcasts? I feel like it's people that might be raising money or doing syndication, things like that. One of my best friends locally here, he's got asked to be on podcasts, but he's like, I don't want newer investors hitting me up or random people hitting me up. But I was like, you have to look at the positives of it. If he goes on, like, I think it's Whitney Sewell's podcast, you might have random people hitting you up just trying to give you money for deals, where he takes all his deals down from lenders. So wholesalers, I'm curious about the seller side, maybe even becoming like an authority figure. Like if you had radio ads or TV ads, you might even be able to talk on podcasts of how working with your company, you're able to help all these sellers out of tough situations and really be the superhero in somebody's life that might be going through a hard time, things like that. So it's interesting, just this interview and this perspective and your perspective of how all these different investors can benefit from building a personal brand through getting on podcasts.
Yeah, I think when looking at the different real estate niches out there that we generally see success, as you mentioned, syndicators, great success, turnkey investors, as you mentioned, Allie Boone, that's what her business is, and then also wholesalers that are in a specific part of the country. We work with one based out of Indianapolis. So for his example, he goes on podcasts and he just talks about the market in Indianapolis, why it's a good idea to invest there, with his goal where he'll get the properties under contract, say a property for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. And, he'll put all those numbers there for the investors. So he's trying to find investors throughout the country that, maybe aren't in Indianapolis, but are in, say, California, where obviously in California, they're going to have a lot more money. The home prices are a lot more than in Indianapolis. So he's trying to basically attract those out-of-state investors by going on these podcasts. So I think really, even if you're looking at fix and flippers, it's a potential fit. Private lenders, those who are looking to loan out their own money, a good fit. I would say really, working with all these different real estate investors, I haven't seen pretty much any niche that hasn't had success, because it's all about, even if you aren't raising money or aren't selling properties, if you're just looking to partner with someone, it's just a good fit to just get yourself out there and continuing to network, because you never know when that person's going to be able to help you out.
Yeah, it snowballs too, 100%, like the Allie Boone example I had. So is that kind of the first step, thinking through it just in conversation here, is kind of understanding your unique value that you bring to the marketplace? So for example, the guy that you work with in Indianapolis is able to provide, properties at a way cheaper purchase price than potentially out-of-state investors. Because every wholesaler, even that's listening to this too, you have to have an end product that you're dispositioning or selling. So, and I remember for me, when I was in wholesaling instead of startup software, some of our buyers would be in DC or other markets that weren't local to Baltimore. So I think anybody that's listening to this, even if you're just wholesaling or, a single family investor, I think that you could get on podcasts and talk about what your product is, C-class rentals in Indianapolis, whatever it may be, whatever purchase price it is. I feel like you can get on some type of exposure, get some type of personal brand, and that's just going to amplify your message the day and age that we're in. That's kind of my brain dump of the 80-20 of why you guys should be listening to this interview and consider building a personal brand, and podcasting is the tool to do that. Essentially, it's kind of my 80-20 diagnostic of this interview.
I think anyone, when you're looking at, even if you're in a unique market, I think that's super beneficial. Like we work with a client and he does turnkey investing, but based out of Baltimore, where I don't know that many people who are investing in Baltimore as a city of itself, where let's say, I don't know, if you're in a city, let's say in Idaho, where not that many people know of, or I think you have that advantage benefit. Let's say you grew up there, the area, and then you come on, then you talk about the benefits of the market, talk about what you've been able to achieve, how you've been able to achieve it. Then you're going to attract that money from coming from out of state where you might have not necessarily been able to beforehand. So I think everyone just has a unique story to tell on these podcasts, especially when, looking at, everyone has these different stories as a real estate investor, whether they're turnkey, whether they're a wholesaler, they're in different markets, they had different horror experiences that they've come through, where I find that no matter how experienced, or even, even if you're 2 to 3 years, there's someone out there who's going to be a beginner, who's newer than you, that can look to you for advice and potentially reach out to you, to be a mentor, maybe they perhaps even pay you and you go down that road. So I think there's just a lot of different avenues there.
Mm-hmm. Yep, a lot of potential benefits from just consistently doing a few things here. So steps-wise, we want to figure out kind of like what someone would be talking about on a podcast, which is kind of more or less their unique value that they're bringing to the market, which could be part of their storytelling, deals they've done, what it's like to work with their company, XYZ. If it's on more so the dispo side, it could be talking about, what type of return on investment they would get on from working with them. 2 would be more so like logistics, having a website set up, places where people could contact you, verify your credibility and authority, like a website, probably social media. How do we go about getting on podcasts and finding these podcasts, if you want to kind of go down that route, now that we have myself and the listeners kind of have an idea of the personal brand they're building and kind of the intention of doing so?
Most certainly. So once you have that, I guess, unique selling proposition for yourself, and that's just thinking about what makes you unique, what do you love to talk about? So obviously there's going to be something different about yourself. And as an example, we work with a syndicator out of Southern Maine, where what makes him different than the other syndicators that are out there. And what makes him different is he makes all sure his properties are environmentally friendly. He uses only environmentally friendly appliances. So like that's an example of what makes him different than the other syndicators that are out there. As a wholesaler, what makes you different than the other wholesalers out there? So you want to just be able to go out there and then differentiate yourself. And then once you have that story and you have a sense of the type of what you want to be talking about on podcasts, then it's going out there and researching shows. So there's a couple of different tools that we use as a company. The first one is called listennotes.com. And what you can do is you can go on there. There's a keyword search box. You could type in, say, real estate investing. You click search, and then you can see all of the podcasts that are real estate investing shows out there. I would recommend paying for the premium membership if you're actually serious about it. I believe right now it's $125 a month, but it's going to be super beneficial. Back in the day, I want to say when I started 3-4 years ago, it was free, but it definitely makes sense why they charge a premium price now, because you can search by date, you can search by the number of episodes. If you've never been on a podcast before, you could search for a podcast that say only has 1 to 10 episodes out. So it's going to be a newer show, so you can get that experience as a podcast guest. So it's really using Listen Notes, going out there and searching for shows. And then what we recommend is creating a spreadsheet. We used to use Google Sheets, going on there, and then basically just creating a sheet where you go podcast name, host name, website, iTunes link, and then contact information where you can go to the person's website, see if they have a contact form or see if they have an email there, and then putting that down on the sheet. And then once you do that, say you put 15 to 20 shows that you think that you'd be a great fit on. From there, it's just reaching out and pitching to the hosts and trying to just make it unique within those pitches, instead of just doing like a cookie cutter copy and paste pitch. Just, mentioning something about the show, just anything that can make you a little bit unique. It doesn't, I wouldn't recommend spending 30 minutes per pitch, because no one's going to have that much time. But if you spend, say, 5 minutes, 10 minutes on a pitch, it'll just make you a little bit more valuable. And then just send out your pitches. And once you do that, what I would recommend is probably waiting about 5 days and then just following up with those pitches, because you're not going to hear back from all of them the first time. People might read your email the first time and say, I'm just too busy, I'll get to this tomorrow, and then they never get to it. So just by having that follow-up is going to be beneficial. And then once you do hear back from those hosts, booking yourself on the show, and then just preparing for your interview. And the number one thing that I would recommend is definitely just getting a podcast microphone. It's pretty much an absolutely necessary. And there's 3 different ones that I would recommend that you could go on Amazon. The first one is going to be the Blue Yeti microphone. You have the Blue Snowball, and then the Audio Technica 2020. I've used all 3 of them. I think they're all pretty good. The cheaper end is going to be the Blue Snowball, which right now I believe it's about $50, and then the other 2 are going to be around $100. And then once you have that equipment, you're pretty much just ready to go. And it might be a little bit nerve-wracking in the beginning going on these podcast interviews, and that's why I'd recommend starting on those smaller shows that have those 1 to 10 episodes that are out. And then once you feel you do 2 or 3 interviews, you get comfortable, then you work your way up to the medium shows. And then once you get comfortable on those, then you piggyback your way to those large shows. Because we'll find that sometimes clients come to us, and if they've only been on 1 or 2 podcasts before, they want to go on the Bigger Pockets podcast, which, is probably the number 1 rated real estate show that's out there. And you don't want to go on there if you don't have your story down. You don't want to go on there if you're going to make yourself, I guess, sound like a fool, sound like an idiot, where it's just nice having those smaller shows where you can practice on, you're helping each other out, because that host probably doesn't have too many people reaching out, where probably not too many people are reaching out to yourself. So just, mutually benefiting. And then from there, just playing the long-term strategy where podcasting, you can't expect to do 1 interview and everyone in the world's going to find you. It's more of a strategy where you just want to continue, consistently do it, 2 to 3 interviews a month over the course of pretty much forever, because there's always new podcasts coming out. The popularity has definitely seen a great increase, and it's just playing that long game. And the cool thing about podcasts is, let's say you do an interview and it gets released September 30th. Well, that interview is always going to be there, and that content is going to be recorded. You don't have to go back and re-record it. So let's say someone discovers that podcast in December, they can listen to your interview in September, and then go to your website and end up contacting you, which is a really cool thing about podcasts, where it's not so much like a blog post where you might have to go back and update it. The podcast interview pretty much just lives there forever.
Very cool about the podcast, and good insight as well. I'll definitely agree with that. I get multiple, maybe on average, if I had to guess, maybe 5 emails a week of someone reaching out to get on the show. I know they have systems and stuff in place where they research real estate investing podcasts, find out the host name, One little tidbit though that I do appreciate, some people will leave reviews and they start their first email. Just as a quick tip for you guys, they'll say, "Hey, I left a review of the 80/20 real estate show," and they'll attach like a screenshot of leaving a review, which is pretty cool. But yeah, like real estate guys, like your acquisitions and your KPIs, it's a numbers game and all about consistency, as is life and quality of life, happiness, everything like that. It's like taking consistent compounded actions daily, weekly, monthly that are going to lead to results down the line, having that long-term mindset about it and perspective about it. But that is very cool about podcasting. I think it's like Gary Vee that says it's like you record a podcast, as long as it's up, it's going to be there in perpetuity for people to check out. So someone could hear this podcast a year later and reach out and get insight on it, which is pretty sweet.
And I definitely think where you had just mentioned leaving a screenshot review. So that's something our company, I'd say probably did in the last 3 months. And we always thought that podcast hosts wouldn't care about it, but they definitely love when you leave that review for them. We've seen them to be a lot more appreciative. And again, it probably takes 5 to 10 seconds of your time. Go on iTunes. You can leave a review. Well, what we do is we'll type up the review, screenshot that, and then after that, we'll click the submit button. And we found definitely great results doing that. It's something probably our company have been doing from the beginning. So that's definitely a good tip, and I'm glad that you brought that up.
For sure, because I think everybody who's on LinkedIn, you kind of just get those copy and paste messages and friend requests. I cannot delete those fast enough. But anytime I get an email for a podcast request, I at least look through it. The ones I typically decline are if they're more like financial advisor types. Somehow we get those in our funnel, I guess, just from real estate investing. But pretty much what I look for, just to give you guys a podcast host perspective, is I'm always looking to just concisely extract the most valuable info possible for anybody that might be listening to this, trying to be transparent and authentic as possible, because I realize that there's so many podcasts out there. So I'm going to be as authentic and transparent and bring on a guest that's as concise and value-driven as possible for you guys. So that's why I only have about 10% that are, I guess, cold email outreaches that come to me. But I've had really good success kind of filtering those out, saying yes to a small portion of those, maybe 10, 20% of the cold emails I get. And some of those are from Trevor, which is pretty cool. I want to talk a little bit about what it's like working with your company, which I'm curious to do, because I'm sure that you would just outsource this. You mentioned clients, and I know Allie, everything like that. What would it be like for someone that kind of just wants to outsource that process of reaching out and working with podcasting, you and your company?
Sure. So what we do is generally hop on a call. We always just want to make sure a client's going to be a fit, set their expectations, because sometimes we'll get clients come to us, and they'll be right away. They want to be Bigger Pockets podcast. They want to be on the Joe Rogan show. And if I could get them on there, I'd probably be charging a lot more than I currently do. So we always just make sure we can align with your fit. And we also do background check on our end. We've had potential clients come to us that don't have a great track record. When you type in their name, they have lawsuits or issues with the SEC, which, probably is, if any host is going to be looking them up. So we just like to do that vetting on our end. And then from there, what our team would do, if we agree, pretty much from there, send over our contract, send over our initial invoice. And then from there, we would send over a list of questions that allows you to really hone in on that unique selling proposition. We'll go into the questions you love to answer. What do you like to talk about? What's your sort of rags to riches story? Just really get that deep insight. And then from there, our team would go out, we would create a pitch, one sheet, and then also give you our database of shows that we have on file from the last couple of years. We'd do a little bit of vetting on our end, because not all of those shows are going to be a fit. And then from there, we just reach out and then sort of get the clients booked on shows. And the cool thing about our team is we have booking agents, and it's sort of been a process that I've really refined. In the first year of my company, I did all the pitching for the clients. Second year, I've brought on my first employee, taught her the processes, and then now we're up to, I believe, 5 employees. So it's been kind of cool, where it's one of those things where I guess I never really outsourced it from the beginning. I was in the mud, doing all the work, testing everything. And it's not one of those things where I feel like if someone comes to us, the host has never done it themselves. The company has never done it themselves. I've done all the work. I've made all the mistakes where we've taken on a client that's a real estate investor early on in the beginning, pretty much the first two or 3 months. And I pitch them to all real estate agent shows, and quickly learned there's quite a difference between those. And that's going to be a big no-no. So I guess for us, it's just, I guess that's an experience. Our company is really cool, where I love real estate investing. It's something that I can see with this company where once I pay off my student loans in the next month or two, save up to start investing in properties, because that's really what I see this company as, is being able to help investors where, the investors come to pay me, and then I'm going to use that money to invest in real estate myself and then build that passive income, build that financial freedom. And it's just something that I'm super interested in on my end. So I feel like a lot of times when I talk to prospective clients, I can talk about real estate where I don't necessarily have investments, but I'm always reading books on real estate investing. So I think that's, a little cool thing about our company as well.
Yeah, for sure. What's the best place to reach out and learn more about you and your company?
Sure. So they can reach out to our website. So that's Podcasting You. So that's podcastingyou.com, or my email, trevor@podcastingyou.com, is perfect as well.
Very cool. And once we cut this, I'll make sure I get you or your team to email me over the resources that mentioned, listennotes.com, podcastingyou.com, etc., to make sure I have those in the show notes for you guys. Quick recap just on a few things that are beneficial, whether you're looking to get on a podcast or not. I think one of the main takeaways is always come back and reflect on what your unique value proposition is to the market. Like, what makes you different than other investors? Not that you should be concerned necessarily about competition. It's all between you and you, but it's something good to just think about what differentiates you from other people out there and why people would have an A+ experience working with you. That's one of the best. That's one of the first nuggets I want to recap. The second one you talked about before getting on bigger podcast shows like Bigger Pockets, Joe Rogan, etc. I think it's a good thing to kind of know your message and what, like, not your life meaning, but if someone asks you, like, what's your story or what do you see in your life? I think it's good. And this is from my buddy's dad, Rob Weinhold, who's has a public relations company. He's on Fox News, all the biggest networks, global and nationwide, is just knowing your message. Like, what's your story? If you don't tell your story, somebody else will, and you might not like it. So I think those are two good nuggets to take away here, whether you want to go on a podcasting tour right now or not, is reflect and understand why you're uniquely gifted and creative in working with these sellers, working with these investors, and how that's different from other investors in your market, and maybe even nationally, if that's the case, if you're doing wholesaling nationally. And then come up with concise ways to tell your ideologies and stories, whether you're going to be talking about that on a podcast or not. So those are two of my favorite nuggets that we were able to extract out of Trevor on here, and appreciate you, man, for helping our audience today, sending me some cool interviews. Very awesome getting to know you, man.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. Check out podcastingyou.com in the show notes for more things on Trevor and his company. Have an amazing rest of your day wherever you listen to this, guys. Thank you.